back. The chair recognizes Mr. Goldman from New York.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chairman, and thank you, Ms. Dixon, for being here with us today. I'm from New York. New York State experienced its first COVID-19 case on March 1st, 2020, and I actually got COVID myself on March 10th, very early on. New York was at the epicenter of the pandemic at the beginning, and more than 78,000 New Yorkers have died as a result of COVID. As families in New York endured record unemployment throughout the pandemic, the unemployment insurance system became a lifeline to nearly 5 million New Yorkers. In my district, organizations like the Chinese American Planning Council connected at least 740 households with unemployment insurance, nearly 2,000 families with housing assistance, and more than 1,300 people who were excluded from federal relief programs got aid through New York City's innovative Immigrant Emergency Relief Program. And that's just one outstanding organization of many. When COVID surged and 22 million people lost their job, it fell to our unemployment insurance system to take on the immense volume of new claims. New York's Department of Labor distributed more than $105 billion, which is the equivalent of 50 years' worth of benefits in the 2 years from the start of the pandemic. But obviously, this new influx of benefits opened itself up to fraud, especially through identity theft online, which I know you have spoken about. The New York State Department of Labor has recommended that Congress provide sustained investments and additional resources to help states combat the ever-evolving threat of cyber fraud. And Ms. Dixon, I'm curious if what you think Congress should do to assist states, separate from the sort of federal baseline that you talked about. Where would our resources be most effective in assisting states to modernize and upgrade its unemployment insurance systems?
I'm echoing folks from the first panel. The information technology investments are critical. We have a decentralized system. There are 53 different unemployment insurance programs, and so there are 53 opportunities for criminal fraud rings to attack the system. And so really being able to invest in those systems, to harden those systems, to make sure that those offices are staffed. And one other really critical thing that Congress could do is create a program like the Extended Benefit Program that actually can be pre-programmed and already have the fraud measures built into it so that when there's a crisis, it just triggers on. And states are ready, and they're not rushing to program a different program each time that there's a crisis.
Thank you. One of the most, I think, productive and effective measures that Congress passed was the child tax credit. And I'd love for you to talk a little bit about the success of the child tax credit and why it was so successful at reducing child poverty.
So one piece of it was that money actually went into families' bank accounts, and they did not have to wait until they filed their taxes to get this money. And so when you add that money together with the unemployment insurance payments, you have families actually getting cash to meet their needs at a critical time. And we see that in the reduction of poverty, like what the huge impact that was to families and children all over the United States.
And you're drawing a distinction between the earned income tax credit, which comes when you're paying your taxes, as opposed to cash in direct deposited or sent to you by check, in that moment. Is that what you're saying?
No, so the child tax credit is also generally not paid on a monthly basis the way it was in this instance. So it generally is something that either folks are changing their tax withholding to account for, or they're waiting until they file their taxes to get it. So what was really revolutionary was actually giving the cash, putting the cash in families' bank accounts.
And in my final seconds, can you talk especially about how important that child tax credit was to underserved communities and people of color in particular?
Well, we know that those families are the ones who are hit the hardest in this pandemic, but they're also sort of chronically hit the hardest because they are in the lowest paying jobs. And so to make sure that children actually have their needs met, this was critical. And it was critical, it would have been critical at any time, but it was especially critical during this pandemic. And it would be great if Congress could figure out how to reinstate it, because the impact was just phenomenal for families.
Thank you, and I yield back.
Gentleman's time has expired. The